It is time to start. And we are recording. And welcome to Thursday afternoon mass media history. We have some homework this week, and I will do the share screen and show you. Okay. I know it's gnarly out there. Lee's 300 word about an ancient media product. Clocks and compasses, I get stuff like that, are devices, but they are not media. We went over the what is media and what's not. I've gotten a couple of responses already. What's ancient? Arbitrary, but say the invention of the printing press. Someone asked about Romeo and Juliet, and that's an old story, and I took it. I mean, I'm being flexible. And while the Bible, yeah, if you want to do a book of the Bible, fine, but it is a book of the Bible. They all have their own stories, from Exodus and Genesis to the Gospels to Revelation. They all have a different story. So focus on one book. Describe what your media thing is, why it's important, what its history is, and how we use it today. So, but again, I'll answer questions. And I may have mentioned in my earlier note, you can go down now. People saw you. She's going to go rest. Go. Earlier note, there will be no actual class meeting next week. I have had a death in the family and I have to go to Connecticut. And so with my emotional support puppy. And so on next Tuesday and Thursday, I will be in Connecticut. So that's where I'm originally from. That's why I talk the way I do. So no class meetings, but I will record a couple of lectures without you. And what to just keep you engaged, make sure you're doing it. I will do a one question, 5-point extra credit for each lecture, just to give you an opportunity to get something out of it. So that's up and coming. So I appreciate your presence and your understanding. For what it's worth, back in the day, my mother has passed. This is my mother. This is what I looked like when I was your age, and that's my grandmother. But anyway, that's what's going on. For the purpose of this class, we continue the ancient stuff, and I will take drafts on your essays through this week. So we start in the ancient world, but the big question is, why do we study Western civilization when there's many other civilizations out there? I'll tell you.
Have you ever wondered at the fact that people all over the world speak English? Mm-hmm. I do. Throughout most of history, languages have tended to break off from one another. People who speak the same language get separated somehow, and over the years, these groups' languages shift away from each other. First, they become different accents, then different dialects, then entirely different languages. Yet there is a force that counteracts this natural tendency, and that is an empire. Empires span many different states with many different languages.
This is Alexander the Great's empire. He started here, and he spread out through Turkey, Greece, Egypt, into Persia and Afghanistan. And so they brought their culture, their mythology, the ideas of democracy and philosophy and theater to all of these lands?
For obvious reasons, the language of the dominant empire ends up being adopted by its member states. Imperial administrators tend to impose their language on the states they govern. And
that's why we're speaking English, because the British were all over the world in the 17th, 18th, and 19th century.
Member states, in turn, attempt to learn the imperial language. This helps them communicate with their overlords. It also helps them to share in the knowledge and information available in the empire. Perhaps the best example of this phenomenon was Alexander the Great's empire. Now, Alexander the Great's empire was not long-lived. It broke into several smaller kingdoms almost as soon as it was formed. Yet there was one enduring aspect of Alexander's campaign of conquest, and that was Hellenization. Hellenization refers to Alexander the Great's practice of bringing Greeks with him on his conquests and installing them as administrators in his growing empire. The result was that Greek culture, philosophy, art, and language were quickly spread across the ancient world. Though Alexander's empire soon crumbled, the Greek administrators stayed put, and Greek soon became the universal language of the ancient world. Linguistic expansion under Alexander spread Greek as a common language. Anyone who was anyone in the Mediterranean basin could read and write Greek. Later, under the Romans, everyone who was anyone could read and write Latin. Just like nowadays, anyone who's anyone in the world can read and write in English. The importance of a common language cannot be understated. So what if you've got a sweet written language? It doesn't help a lick if people don't understand it. What's the point of being able to read and write if you don't know the lingo? Thus, though writing had been invented and refined for almost 1,000 years, knowledge was still restricted to people who shared a common language. Though earlier empires made efforts at linguistic unification, none were equipped with a full alphabet like the...
Okay, remember we did the alphabet before? Well, then not everybody had the same alphabet, but the Greeks took it, made that language and spread it throughout the civilized world. And I have been there. I've lost 30 pounds since then. What do we get from the Greeks? Myths and stories, theater, arts, philosophy, culture, the idea of democracy. The first time that you didn't have a king was in Athens. And while they were sitting around talking about all of that, the Spartans who did have a king came in and whooped them bad. And so you have that dynamic tension between, even today, a forceful, organized country and a disorganized but democratic country. And you see that here in this country. And then Sparta versus, and then the Spartans conquered the Greek world and they fought the Persians. And if you remember the movie, The 300, the Battle of Thermopylae, they held off, they held off the Persians and eventually defeated them. What is Persia today but Iran? So Western civilization and Persian Iranian civilization have been fighting pretty much over the same turf for 2,500 years. Alexander comes along, we saw the map earlier at around 330 BC. And one thing they did and you didn't see in the tape is he founded the library, which was in Egypt, where Cairo now is. So he took all the knowledge that the Greeks had, but the people had in India and Persia and the Middle East, and kept it in one place. So all that learning and knowledge that people had for thousands of years were kept in that library. And then the Greeks were taken over by the Romans. And here's the Roman Empire. We'll go out a little and see, Here we have who's bordering them, the Persians. The Romans, you could go from the Middle East to England, and you have the same language, Latin. You have roads, so ideas, and you had papyrus and stuff like that. So ideas, people, news can travel from Egypt to England, all over from the Middle East. There's Baghdad to Morocco, to Spain, to the edge of Germany. So you, like they said with Alexander, this empire went in the other direction, but you have roads, a common language, and ideas that can spread. Oops, wrong one. The first daily newspaper was called Acta Diurna, which means my day by Julius Caesar. Caesar was, hello. Caesar was up here. He was up here. He was in Gaul. He was in England. It was cold. It was swampy, and nobody cared. But every day he would send out his newspaper. Today, I fought the Belgae, aka the Belgians. If you've ever been to Belgium, it's not a big deal. Or I've beat the Helvetians, which are the Swiss. Again, not a big deal, but everybody knew who Caesar was. He became a media star. On the other hand, Gaius Pompey, his great rival, was down here in Egypt and Greece, and he had a lot more money and he had bigger army, but Caesar had the media. So when he walked into Rome, people said, wow, it's Caesar, it's the guy. Media people today have become rich and famous. What else? Oh yes, probably my background, of course, my smoke detector probably needs another battery. Sorry about that. Yeah. Hello. Anyway, so Christianity spread over those same roads. Christianity happened down here, where writing began. So you could go and spread the word, the Gospels. Paul and his epistles had letters to the Ephesians, which are here, the Corinthians over here, the Romans. He brought the word through Rome, and that is why one of the major reasons why Christianity became the dominant religion, because they had the common language, they had writing, they had literacy. It was in the media. So that's one of the reasons Christianity did well. I've heard the line that why Christianity was so successful was because Jesus had 12 good Jewish PR men. I don't disagree with that. Christianity became the official religion 330 AD. But then, as history happens, things turn bad. Literacy declines, Dark Ages, Rome falls, barbarians come in from Russia and Central Asia. And then there was a period where there was a comeback about 100 years later, but then guess what? A pandemic. The plague comes in, a lot of people died. And so you had barbarians, the loss of school, and climate change. It got cold, and you had the plague. So things, yeah, the Dark Ages really sucked. But what kept Western civilization going
In principio erat verbum. In the beginning was the Word.
The Word, the book, again, the media. In Latin, that one language that still tied everything together. And you can guess what that book was.
There was a man of venerable life and blessed memory, the father and founder of monasteries, who was given the same name as the prophet Jonah. For what is pronounced Iona in Hebrew and is called Columba in Latin means one and the same thing, a dove.
Saint Jonah, Columba, founded a monastery on the island of Iona in Scotland. And the monks came, and they're far away from all the barbarians. They're on the edge of the world at that time. And they're sitting around and they are learning to read. And they are copying one book, the Bible. They're sitting in a monastery and several monasteries in England and Ireland on the far edge of civilization, and they are rewriting Bibles.
In the last years of the world, a son will come, whose name Columba will be famous throughout all these ocean islands of Ireland, Scotland, and the Western world. So great a name could not have been given to the man of God, but by divine providence. For it is shown in the Gospels that the Holy Spirit descended upon the only begotten Son of the everlasting Father in the form of that little bird. By God's gift from the days of his infancy, our abbot was enriched with the appropriate name of Columba.
Okay, Saint Columba, also called Scholastica, organized monks.
Describes very well the greatest gospel book that has survived, the Book of Kells.
And here's an example of their work. The Book of Kells, which I have seen in Dublin. Show you some pictures of it.
A story is told of St. Kieran of Clonmacnoise that he used the antlers of a wild stag as a bookstand. And when
and Clonmacnoise, I've been there too.
he read his Psalter, a fly walked along the line,
And they're sitting and watching flies.
stopped singing,
Copying
the fly stopped.
Bible.
And when the
All
saint
they did all
resumed
day.
his psalter again, the fly moved on.
But anyway, they're sitting around, they're copying the Bible. And their places, let's see, get some pictures.
Wales is the most celebrated Irish medieval manuscript there is, and probably the most famous manuscript to survive from anywhere in the Middle Ages. We have to really ask why that is, given that the text is a copy of the Gospel
Okay, you get the
is on a level which is frequently defied verbal description.
The Book of Kells actually contains a fourfold gospel made up of the individual gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Okay, so it's got
And in the
gospel.
early church, Christian commentators
Anyway, you get the idea. These guys, Book of Kells is the Gospels, not the whole Bible. And they are copying Bibles. That's all they do. And those monks come and they teach literacy throughout the Roman world, including Alcuin of York, who taught Charlemagne. And they start to keep that language alive. From way out here, here's where Iona is right there, and Clonmacnoise is here. And these people are away from the barbarians. And then they bring it back. They bring back that learning. At the same time, you have another book. Muhammad, on the other side of the empire, pulls together their creation myths, and he writes a book, and he pulls together all the different myths and puts them in a common written language. Muhammad's here. Down here. And again, here's Persia. They're still fighting in Afghanistan. We're still fighting in Afghanistan. Anyway, he's down here pulling together and getting the Quran in a common language. They all spoke different languages. He got the common Arabic language and made that up, pulled that together, has the book and the language, and his people, because here everybody had been killed by war or famine or a plague, a pandemic. So this is all empty. So all his people come, they bring their book and pull it together. All the way to France, where Charles Martel beat an advanced unit of Muslims, and they went back to Spain. And Spain was Arabic for centuries. But we've been fighting over this bit of land between the Persians and the Greeks and the Romans and the Jews and the Arabs for 1400 years. We're going back and forth through here and being pushed back. It's more or less the same conflict that we're having now with the Arab world that we've had for 1300 years, back and forth between this area. So, at this time, these were the civilized people. They had the book, they had more reading and writing, they had math, and they had the library at Alexandria. They had the knowledge that these people had lost, and it's only been preserved. So that, folks, is the Dark Ages. It gets better, and we'll do It Gets Better next time. Anyway, So that's the ancient world. Next week, this week, by tomorrow, and I'll take drafts through tomorrow evening. Give me drafts of your final papers are due tomorrow at midnight. I will take, take drafts until tomorrow. And I'll be in contact next week, but I'm going to pre-record because I'll be out of town. Anyway, come on. Any questions on any assignment? Oh, there's some questions in the chat. Okay, sorry about that. Sorry about the muting. I'm not sure who was on. Anyway, I'm a doctor, not a mister. And that beeping is mine. It's my smoke detector's battery is dying. Always something. Anyway, any other questions?
To give the draft to you, do we like email that to you, or do
Email
we
it.
submit
Don't
it
just
somehow?
put it in the Dropbox, because the Dropbox, I can't tell what's a draft and what's a final one. So email me
Okay.
the draft, put your final one in the Dropbox.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Other stuff. Okay. I think that's it for today. I'll post this shortly. And I'll be around. I'll see you live in 2 weeks or a week and a half, but I'll be in touch. All right. Thank
Have a
you
good
for
day.
understanding.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.